You didn't know you were coming on for a therapy session today, did you?
I know. I love it though. I love it because this is good. This is good to really ask. I haven't asked myself this question
Yeah.
ever or a long time.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Highlight Podcast. This is a new business podcast it's basically a place where we're going to feature e-commerce entrepreneurs, people that are out there having their dreams, putting products online, trying to sell them. And today we got the inaugural episode with my new friend, Craig Whiteley, also known as AKA Craig the Barber, AKA the man with the best fade in town, the best fade giver in town. I don't even know if I'm saying these words the correct way, Craig. I'm going to bring you in. Tell me, am I close? Am I just being a cheesy dad here? What am I doing?
You're close, man. You're close. I give a mean fade. I give a mean
Mean
fade.
fade.
I'll take that.
I love that. I love that. Well, I appreciate you joining me today. I'll
Thanks
give
for having
everybody a
me.
little bit of a background just based on what I know. You started out as a barber, had some pain points in that process, and then you created a new company called Burke Avenue. And how long has Burke Avenue been around again?
Burke Avenue has been around as of December last year. 7 years.
Wow.
7 years. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, congratulations. Anybody that breaks
Thank
the
you.
5 year mark is a legend in the entrepreneur space, as far as I'm concerned. Because I think
Oh man.
the last time I looked at the SBA data on businesses that close in the first 5 years, I think it's 82, 83%, something like that. It's
Wow.
wild. It's really high. So a lot of dreamers out there, but they don't actually get across that finish line to where they have a healthy, sustainable business. But it
Yeah.
seems like you are. I know you think things could be better. I'm sure that's why you're a great entrepreneur. But like you've made
Always.
it a pretty good way. So cheers to you, man. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
very welcome. Well, I'd love to start the show with just how did you get into barbering, man? That's a super interesting career field. And I love to talk. So I always thought I'd like to talk to people sitting in a chair while I work on their hair.
Yeah, I think that sitting in having those conversations, man, is what just really just pushed me into that space of barbering. Is just having conversations with people in the chair, learning so much from them learning so much from me, them inspiring me, them challenging me. You know, um, when it comes to cutting hair, the one thing people don't realize is you have broken the personal space of a person, right? And so there are two options. Number one, they'll depending on your personality, you will allow them to become more relaxed, more vulnerable, more open, more transparent because you are in their personal space for however long you're in that chair. Or you might have a barber, or you might be a person that is a little bit more standoffish, and then they do this, they close themselves off, and then you're recognizing that that person doesn't like that personal space interruption so much, and then sometimes the conversations or sometimes the services aren't as fun or as exciting. I can tell you this that 98% of my customers are completely opposite of that. The ones that were the ones that, and I'll tell entrepreneurs this all the time, man, you got to fire your customers, man. If they're not going to make you comfortable in your space, there's no need to have them in there with you. And so those are the ones that I fired.
I got to hear the story. Like, you got to give me one story. We don't have to say any names. We can protect the
Sure.
innocence here. But I'd love to
Okay.
hear who's a customer you fired. Like, what happened? Like, why'd you fire
Oh,
him?
dude, that guy was a jerk. Oh, man. It's funny how that person just popped right up. So I used to work at a barber shop in Beverly Hills. It's called Gornick and Drucker Barbershop in Montage Hotel. Beautiful, beautiful barbershop. And it was a two-chair barbershop. And it was a very, very high level customer that called downstairs while I was at lunch and wanted to get a service. And so he called the front desk. The front desk booked the appointment because there's an availability, but no one told me. So, I'm casually eating my lunch. I get back to the barber shop and I see a gentleman sitting in my chair. And I look at him and he's looking at me. And I'm looking at my schedule like, why is this guy sitting in my chair? I don't have an appointment. And he's staring at me as if I disrespected him to the utmost because I wasn't there for his appointment. And so I looked at him and I said to him, I said, how you doing? He was like, I'm good. And he said it really stern. I said, can I help you? And then so the person at the front desk comes in and says, hey, Craig, this is Mr. Such and Such, and he made an appointment. And I said, oh, you're here for an appointment? He looked at me, he said, yes, I'm here for a haircut. And I said, well, welcome. And what type of haircut would you like? I kept it very, very short, very firm, but I did not give off any opportunity for him to feel that I was less than him. Because a lot of people in that particular space, and a lot of people in general, feel like service workers are sometimes beneath them, so to speak, and they treat them like they treat them with less respect sometimes. And so for me in my career as a barber, I made sure that that was never the case, and I made sure that they understood that they're in the seat of an expert barber that understands way more than they do about hair care, skin care. And not to mention, I didn't share this before, but I also left my career as a person in IT and banking before I became a barber. So not only do I have a professional background, I brought that into the space of barbering. And so, long story short, he's was very curt, and he wanted a haircut and a shave. And so, in the process of that, I made sure that he felt my presence, that I was not happy with how he was treating me. And we had very short conversations, very specific questions like, how would you like your haircut? How would you like your shave? Do you have any types of irritations you need to be concerned? Very, very specific, short, to the point services. I cut his hair, and I spoke to everyone else in the barbershop casually, like I normally do. But for him, when I had something to say, I was very short, just like he was. Before the shave started, he literally just let go of all of that anger and anxiousness that he had, and then he started talking to me. And he was just like, how long you been cutting hair? And I was just like, about, I think at that point I was like over 10 years as a professional, and I started cutting hair at 14. He's like, oh, he's like, I have a barber in Vegas that cuts my hair, blah blah blah. And before you know it, opened right up, gave him a haircut, finished the shave, absolutely loved it. And before he left to fly back to where he was from, or where he was going next, he gave me his number, and he was like, yeah, I'd like for you to come to my house while I'm here. Maybe I get a cleanup before I fly out of town. And before you know it, would you believe, he was the second to last person I spoke to before I moved out of the country. He and I still stay in touch.
Jeez, no
Super
way.
nice guy. But came
You ever
off
give him a hard
as
time
if
for it?
Oh yeah. I brought it a couple times. You remember that time when we met and you were giving? He's like, "Oh, come on, Craig."
I was just having a bad day. That's not. Come on.
Yep. But you know what? He has a personality for in his career that works very well. The position of creating a immediate boundary to succeed in what he does, and then he opens up to whoever he needs to strategically. And so that was his face that he was giving me because he was upset. And needless to say, the front desk should have told him, hey, Craig is at lunch. If you don't mind coming in 30 minutes, he'll be here. But he demanded service then. So, at the end of the day, he waited. But I feel like, nothing happens. Everything happens for a reason. Nothing happens by mistake. And I feel like it was also a challenge, not only for him, but for me, to recognize who he was and not defer or compromise who I am because I know who he was. And that was one of the signature trademarks of who I was when I offered haircutting services, because I offered haircutting services and shaving services, barbering services to very, very, very high-end, very powerful men. And the one thing they loved and enjoyed so much is that I treated them normally. And they also noticed plenty of times that I treated them the same way I treated gentlemen that weren't popular or high end. I treated everyone the same. There were times where I would be in a chair cutting a hair with a customer, just no one that was famous, and I'd get a phone call and with someone that's famous, and I'm having a conversation. Hey, Craig, can you squeeze me in the next 30 minutes or so? I'm like, no, I can't. Oh, why not? I said, well, I have a customer next, and I have someone right now. And their assumption was always like, oh, you'll just cancel the other guy and bring me in because I'm famous or special. No, I'm not doing that. I said, you're paying me the same amount of money as the other guy is. And I said, everyone deserves that level of respect and high level that I offer. And so I became quite recognized within that space and referred to quite often because of that level of respect that I commanded for myself, as well as the level of respect I gave them. So it was a fun time.
I think Mike Rowe had a quote that said, everybody should do two things in life. The first one is work a service job, like at a restaurant as a waiter or waitress. And the second thing is write a book, because you learn a lot about yourself with either of those activities. And I think I would add on to the waiter waitress thing, or any sort of service job. I think because when you are put in that position of having to serve other people, and that's part of your livelihood, is it's like beyond customer service normally. Like, it is like you are waiting on that person, whether it's cutting hair or, doing, bringing food or coffee or whatever. You are really, you're serving, which is like servant, right? So you're putting yourself very purposely below that other person. And there's just something about that, especially early in everybody's career when we're doing that, which is when most of us work those jobs, is as like, part-time waiters, waitresses, whatever, retail. You're putting yourself below another person probably for the first time in your life. And all of a sudden you realize, like, oh, the world doesn't revolve around me. The world's a better place when I help other people. And by the way, I'm a little happier when I make other people my point of obsession, where I try to help them more than I help myself. And
Yep.
has that mentality, does that resonate with you? And like, do you feel that right now as an entrepreneur with Burke Avenue?
100%. You know, to make people feel good about themselves, especially when they don't realize how much they are not loving themselves or complimenting themselves, for you to be able to step into that space, transform them, and in the process of transforming them, equipping them to maintain that look, equipping them to maintain the handsome that they now feel when it's done, it fills me up so much. I feel like that is the number one reason why I left my career in banking and IT to do this full time, because I started cutting hair when I was a kid, 14 years old. And man, these kids, after I started getting better at cutting hair, my friends would say, "Hey, cut my hair." Man, just to see their faces after I was done, not only was I proud of how much better I was getting, but man, you see them in the mirror and they're just like, they're just feeling themselves. And it's just like, look at that, man. Look at what I have given them the opportunity to feel. And with my skincare products, it's the same thing, man. I get a thrill from people that are take the time to send a review. I don't delete any bad reviews. Thank goodness there have not been any. But what's amazing is that they'll share exactly what I envision these products to do. And on a day-to-day basis, they're seeing their skin transform into what and how it's supposed to perform. And I'm like, and they'll say, like, man, I feel great. This is the best product I've tried. My skin feels like this. I no longer have, for example, the blemishes are slowly disappearing, or the skin darkening. For example, there's this shaving challenge for a lot of people. Everyone actually has this. It's more pronounced in certain skin tones. Is this
Mm-hmm.
thing called hyperpigmentation, which is the darkening of the skin. The skin tends to heal itself and overheal itself, and sometimes the pigment will start getting darker, and so you'll see shaved areas of people's faces darker, or wherever people shave.
Mm.
And my
So
products
it's like a
have,
permanent 5 o'clock shadow almost.
yes.
Yeah,
For some
interesting.
men, you'll literally see where they shave every day.
Yeah,
You
interesting.
see that because of the aggressive nature of the blade, and sadly, because they're not aware of how to reverse that, how to care for their skin. That's
Mm.
why I'm here.
Well, that's what the next thing I was going to ask about was, how did we go from barber to Craig the Barber? Like, that is like, I'm now just doing the thing to now I'm going to be a little bit of a personality about it. Is it like a heart of teaching and wanting to serve those people?
Well, I'll tell you the story and how Craig the Barber even landed for me to even think of the name to be added, right? So I started cutting hair as a professional in Long Beach, California. My first job was at a really cool men's salon at the time called Dean Anthony. And so I worked there for maybe half a year, almost a little bit older than that, longer than that. But then I got a little anxious. Having leaving the corporate world, I was anxious because I was not making the same amount of money or more that I was in the banking space. And so I was thinking, man, I gotta, how do I make more money cutting hair, blah, blah, blah. And so I started aggressively looking for other barbershops that are maybe well known, maybe have higher price points. And so I bumped into this salon that also had a barber shop in it called Fred Siegel Salon. And there was a barber there named Nate. And I found out that he was a barber that became very popular because of the name of the barbershop called Fred Siegel. And they started doing a lot of advertising and marketing. They're always like doing stuff for scotches, and he'd be there as the guest barber doing the commercials and things. And I said, hey, I want to see if I can delve into that space. He interviewed me. He said, I need you to cut my hair. And that'll be the test. And so I cut his hair, and he's like, dude, it's the best haircut I ever had in my life. And I was like, wow, for real? So that put me in a position where he said, I'll put you on the wait list and see, if there's any opportunity that comes, I'll plug you in and we'll get to build that way. And so I'll call this guy every week and a half, just checking, hey, hey, hi, blah, blah, blah. One day, got home from work at Dean Anthony, and sitting there with my wife, and she's like, what's wrong? I was like, man, I want to make some more money, man. This is not what I envisioned when I left my corporate space. And she's just like, well, let's just, don't worry about it. You're working on it. You're building. It's not like you're not working at it. You're getting customers slowly and steady. And so we went away for the weekend, came back. And at this point, back in the day, there were such things as answer machines, right? And so I get back home, still kind of discouraged, but we felt better. Went out for the weekend, went out of town, came back, and I saw that there was a message blinking on my answer machine. I hit play, and the guy, Nate, left the message. He said, hey, Craig, I need you to give me a call. I'm leaving. I'm like, what? He said, I'm moving to Hawaii, and I want to see if you want my job. And so immediately I fumbled. I don't even know how many times I dropped the phone trying to give him a call. I called this guy, man. And he's like, I was like, hey, I'm just calling you back. He said, I'm sorry, it took so long to call you back. It's only a day, 2 days he left the message. I didn't know this at the time. He's like, no, I just called you the other day. I said, yeah, is that opportunity still available? He said, yeah, you're the only one I called. And I'm like, okay. And so he said, you want it? I said, yes. And so I went from cutting hair at the price point at this time of about $30 a haircut to $100.
Do you think that difference in that price was brand, like just the ability to do personal branding and have a name?
Yes, it was the brand of the space. It was a very, very, very high end salon. So they only serviced. They had the best hairstylists. Almost some of them to be arguably some of the best hairstylists in Los Angeles, right? And Nate was one of the best barbers. And for him to tell me I gave him the best haircut he's ever had, I guess qualified me to say, hey, you take the spot. And I hear funny thing is to answer your question about the Craig the Barber situations, I only was at that place for 3 months. And I'll tell you why. I got an opportunity to be asked to work for the Emmys to represent a brand called Lab Series Skincare for Men. And they needed a barber to shave with their products. And in the process of me working out the details to go shave with them, one of the ladies, her name was Annette. I walk into the space where she was going to show, here are our products. This is how you're going to shave the guys. You're going to be here for, I think it was a 3-day event. And so as I'm going in, she's showing me the stuff, and someone walks in and she says, hey, it was like another executive from the company. She says, hey, let me introduce you to Craig the Barber. She named me Craig the Barber. And I was like, I like the ring of that. And so I went with it, man. I went with it. Long story short, man, I ended up being, I pitched a couple ideas with helping them sell their shaving line. They're struggling with they have a whole skincare line, and the shaving part was not doing as well. And so I gave them a few tips on how to sell it better, in the sense of you have to be more relatable to the male consumer so they get what you're saying, so they can then understand why to buy this product.
Yeah.
I pitched it, and for 3 years, man, I was their spokesperson, traveled around the country teaching men how to shave using their products as Craig the Barber.
You know what I think is funny about that is what people don't know that are listening to this. Before we got on the call, you're like, yeah, I don't really know that much about marketing. And like, I got to call BS on that because not only are you like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go work at a better branded salon so I can charge over 3X the prices I was charging previously. Like, that's marketing. That's just branding. Now you're talking about like, yeah, I went in and helped.
Hmm.
I branded myself as Craig the Barber accidentally, but I knew it was a good name. So I picked up on it. Like, yeah,
Yep.
that's a guy that doesn't know anything about marketing. And then on top of that, you figured out, oh, if I want to sell this product, I need to pick a specific customer, aka what we call in the fancy marketing world an ideal customer profile, and that person wants to be
Hmm.
talked to and shown things in a specific way. And what I'm saying is that you got to give yourself some more credit, man, because you're basically doing my job for me. Like there's no room left for guys like me because you've just stumbled your way into all the books that I've read and expertise that I've gained, and like now I'm out of a job just because you just know what you're doing. So that's great. The entrepreneurship lesson that I'm pulling out of this is I'm thinking through like my first business was a barbecue restaurant, and now I'm in a service business with this marketing company, Highbeam. When I think about what really helped you, and tell me if this is wrong, but what I'm hearing you say is I spent so much time one-on-one communicating with my customers that I was able to understand their needs, how to serve them better, how to speak to them, how to set up the chair, how to set up, why that salon that you went to was better. And then ultimately how you're able to actually like help that shaving brand better communicate with people because you had conversations with your customers. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs that I meet in discovery calls for Highbeam, like, oh, hey, should you work with us or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, tell me about your customer. And they just don't know. Like they don't know anything yet. And I'm like, marketing is not, you're not ready for it yet because we don't even know who to target. We don't know what kind of creative to make. We don't know anything. And I think some people get weirdly afraid to talk to their customers in a weird way. But I love what you said a minute ago where you're like, oh yeah, I get excited. Like all the reviews are positive. It fills you up with energy. And I think that's part of your success there is being able to be so in tune with what your customers actually need. Do you find, and I want to talk about Burke Avenue in a second, but I want to skip ahead
Sure.
just for a quick second. Do you find it more difficult to still maintain that connection with customers because you are a e-commerce business now and not so much day to day in the chair?
When it comes to speaking to folks, I don't find it difficult because I feel like I know exactly, when I see someone's overall look, I've been so studied in it for so long, I could just spot certain things really quick. And if it goes to the space of skincare, I just give them a bunch of nuggets. And then it just opens them up to so much. And they're just like, dude, I never knew this, about my skin or blah, blah, blah. And so it's just very easy. But for me, because I have the background of being a barber and I've always been someone that enjoys talking to people, I just spent numerous of years mastering the art of the conversation. I cannot have a customer sitting in my chair that doesn't speak to me. It does not fill me. It does not. It doesn't fill them. To be honest, as everyone, we are built for community. We are social animals. We're social creatures, and we cannot function in the space of not talking to people. And so I love that. And so what I'm doing now is it's fulfilling in a different way, but I've throughout the years done videos and content providing. I mean, I go back to over 12 years on YouTube. I was just dropping out content before YouTube was even really a thing, and I'm going back to that because it's so fulfilling to share all that I know, and then know that people are like, dude, I didn't know that. Just these simple things. And it's very fulfilling in that space because now I'm reaching a wider audience. Some people will comment, some people will respond, but that fills me because I know what I'm sharing is helping someone. That is a part of me that I do miss. I wish I did. I do miss some of the interaction of the behind the chair conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been able to luckily find my fill and
Mm-hmm.
just dropping nuggets online, man. That lives forever. I still
Yeah.
have people commenting on videos I've posted 10 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
wow, I didn't know about this, and it's just like, there it is. And that warms me up. I feel
Yeah.
real
Well,
good
that's one of
about
the
that.
ways we found each other was I was on the internet just down some rabbit hole and ended up on the one of the ads that you guys made for Burke Avenue way back when.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so I totally get the whole like long tail video thing. But I want to go back to the conversation, communication angle that you were just hitting on there a second ago, because you've had thousands of hours of conversations with people. So like, I think that would definitely put you in the expert communicator category. Do you have a couple tips or tricks that help people be better communicators?
I love when I can, especially when I was cutting hair, I love it that I can ask the open ended questions to the customer that then allows them to talk about themselves. I always direct the conversation to the man, men in general. You know, we have most men, I don't care how they say they don't have big egos. We got all have big egos. And we love our egos to be stroked. And I like to do that to the customer in the chair. I love to ask questions that allow them to start talking about themselves. So then I just slide in certain things during the conversation to make them, number one, know that they're being heard. Number two, to boost their ego, and it says like, "Oh man, that's cool. You do that. That's great." You know, and it gives them more of an opportunity to just pour out more, because that's what they want to do. They sometimes men don't talk enough. Not sometimes, all the time. We don't talk enough. Women are the ones that love to talk, and men don't realize that when we talk, there's a certain release that comes off of us that we feel great after the conversation is over. And there have been times where I've had conversations with men that I may have said 10 words and they talk the whole time. And they get out of that chair like, that was the best conversation I've ever had. Why? Because I listened, you know, and that's what we want, is to listen. And so I try my best to always create conversations where they talk first and they lead. And then I just bring them in and give them the opportunity to just, you know, speak about themselves. And I feel like I learn a lot more about people that way. And then it gives me an opportunity to then, when I add, to make them feel that I've really listened to who they are, because they've told me everything, you know.
One of these books back here is called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, and he's a
Oh yeah.
former FBI negotiator. It's one of my favorite books. I read it every year. It's in my list of rereads every year. And it reminds me of the how what question framework that he talks about in that book, where it's a you ask how questions and what questions, because like you're talking about, it invites them to open up with an actual story. You know what I find fascinating about salespeople specifically? They really bad salespeople struggle with communication, and I think they struggle with communication because they try to make the sales process in a weird way, because their financial outcomes are tied to the how that conversation goes, and so they really wanted to make the sale, so they'll be very heavy with like, "Oh, how you doing today? You know, it's nice to meet you. Let me tell you about what we got going on." Blah 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 blah, and then they just like, you know, word vomit on them essentially all the features and of this product and what the price could be and what we could do for negotiation and blah 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 blah. And great salespeople that I've come across are listening, like you're talking about, 80+% of the time, and they're asking how questions, what questions. Well, tell me about your business. What's going on? What are you struggling with? What's happening? How's that going? How's that working? What would it mean for you if we could solve that issue? How much more money could you make? How much could you grow? Do you want to grow? How do you want to grow? I mean, like, you can get them talking so much. And this even applies to like e-commerce business owners when you're doing customer conversations and conducting those interviews. You know, maybe it's on purpose, like at a trade show or something like that, or maybe you're in the wild, or maybe you're even manning the phone doing customer service calls. Don't try to argue with them. That's what I'm hearing you say. Don't try to be combative. Don't try to, oh, let me tell you why you're wrong, or why we're great, or why this is happening. You're very much asking them, oh, what happened? Oh, and you're giving them the space to communicate. Here's what I think happened. And then you can be like, oh, tell me some more about that. And tell me some more, and tell me some more. And I do agree with you that, in men especially, because, you know, I've got the perspective of a male. It's all I got. And I do think the world is does not expect us to communicate, and so we don't. And then when somebody gives us the opportunity to do that, it's very novel. I mean, we don't really expect it to happen. And so, like you're saying, when it does, it feels amazing. I'd love to know, you're in the middle of doing all this stuff in the journey, and then, you know, you're starting to feel passionate about something new. Like, we're starting to see this shaving care line that you're working on. Like, is that the genesis of Burke Avenue, or like, where did Burke Avenue come from?
Wow, good question. So are you asking about the product line or the name? where did it come from? You're speaking about the product itself.
Which one came first in your story, and then we'll go that
Oh,
way.
great question. The product came first. The vision for the product came first, primarily because I was doing a lot of consulting for, I did spokesperson work and then some consulting for a few other brands. But the one thing I kept on noticing was that, you're dealing with these big companies. They're working on making a lot of decisions with data and analytics. They're seeing what sells. They're not really understanding the consumer from the in the trenches kind of perspective, like I was. When I was shaving my customers, I had an assortment of almost 10 to 12 shaving creams, different brands. And based on the customer, I would analyze their skin and I would, like a doctor, prescribe the best shaving cream to shave them for that particular service. And what I noticed is there wasn't many brands that really understood the performance of how the skin performs throughout the shave process, what the skin is doing, how the skin reacts, what is happening to the skin while you're doing that. And I would always pitch this to these brands, like, hey, if you create this product and you make the shaving cream like this, I promise you they'll buy this, they'll buy that. And they were just like, we're not gonna just give them some eye cream and this. And I'm like, you're not understanding the male consumer. And so it came to the point where, when all consulting opportunities closed down, before I took any other, I say, you know what? I'm going to create my own shaving cream. And so I went to town with that. And initially, I came up with a really cool product, and I had a business partner at the time. And I launched it under a blog that I had called The Men's Room. It still exists, themensroom.com, but I don't write on it anymore. It's old. It needs to be either closed down or revamped. I haven't figured out what to do with it yet, but it was named that. Um, Branding, exactly. And so it didn't work out. That partnership didn't do well. It didn't launch, and I just put it on the shelf. And then I went back a few years later, went back and started tweaking it again. And then the product, then it took me 3.5 years to create it. And that was the key product idea and concept. At that point, I didn't have a name for it yet. I just knew that this was going to be this amazing shave cream that's going to change the world. And then one day, I was laying on the back of my head trying to figure out what to name it. I had a list of 40 different names, and one came out of my head. I wanted it to sound luxurious. I wanted it to sound approachable. I wanted it to sound like it has a solid price, but it has value. And I named it Burke Avenue. And Burke Avenue is the first street my family and I moved to when we immigrated to the United States from Jamaica. And we lived on Burke Avenue in the Bronx, New York, for over 10 years. And that was the first street we lived on. First and only street we lived on in the Bronx. And so I named it Burke Avenue because of because of the story behind our experience moving into this country and the drive that was needed, the switching of mindsets to approach a goal. Coming from one country, my parents were both professionals. They went to college, they became professors in universities, teachers, educators. They had to start from scratch when they came to the United States. Wow. Yeah. But it showed their grit, it showed their passion, it showed how they had to separate themselves to succeed and how it worked. And I labeled it and named it Burke Avenue because that's where I saw them and learned so much from them. And I felt like the shaving cream was going to also be a product that breaks the mold, like my parents did, broke a mold and left their country to come to a new one to do what they felt was best for their family. And that passion there was poured into the same concept and mindset of what I've done in my career, leaving the corporate world to become a barber and now produce a product. And I felt like Burke Avenue was the best name to kind of give a stamp to, what my parents did for us. And so that's where the name came from, Burke Avenue.
The question that came to my mind in the middle of that story was you come from parents who immigrated to America. Um, what role do you think that plays in your entrepreneurship journey? Like, did that lead to your success, you think? Do you think there's a hurdle that comes from that you got to overcome?
My parents, having both been professionals their entire lives, and wanting all their kids, all three of us went to college to pursue careers outside of, in the corporate space. But the one thing that I saw with their vision and their drive for their kids to, graduate and go to the corporate space was I saw something different in them that I didn't see in other people that left their countries to come to the United States. I saw a level of guts, a level of just drive, of integrity, a level of fire that my mom and dad had to figure it out, you know. And I feel like that is what you need as an entrepreneur. And I saw that more than I saw how they built their careers again. I saw their drive in a way that maybe inspired me to be an entrepreneur because they were doing things so different. And I feel like entrepreneurs, in order to be one, in order to create something out of thin air, you have to have that number one commitment and the drive to do it. And number two, grit to withstand it. And I saw all of that in my parents. And I think just from a personality perspective, um, I've just never been the type of person that can be in a box, and my parents aren't that either. They did what they needed to do to make sure that their children had roofs over their heads, but my dad completely, and my mom completely had second, third jobs. As there's this stereotype of a Jamaican that Jamaicans don't have one job. Jamaicans have at least two, three. And that is indeed my parents. My parents never only had one job. They had a career. They're always doing two or three things on the other side. And that's what I saw. And for me, that's what inspired me to do the same until I was able to, go out on a limb and become a barber and make that my career. So I don't know if I answered your question properly, but
No.
that was the inspiration that put me on the trajectory to pursue other things outside of corporate.
So I want to get technical for a second. So you got two different products right now still, and then you guys have been selling it online through your store on your website. Do you guys have like Amazon or anything else? Like, do you guys do any distribution into barbershops or stores or anything like that?
So I have it distributed on Amazon, which is awesome. I started out selling it on my website, burkeavenue.com, still being sold on burkeavenue.com. And the distribution is primarily United States. I do have a handful of customers that do order overseas, um, United Kingdom, a lot of even France. I have some folks purchasing, even Australia, as far as Australia, as long as they're willing to pay the shipping costs, and Canada. And so I am I have no concerns or challenges shipping to anywhere. Obviously, the cost is sometimes cost prohibitive, but if the consumer is willing to pay it, then so be it. And so at the moment, I have 7 retailers, which are small retailers, barbershops. I'm not in any big box stores yet. I do hope to one day accomplish a partnership with a big box department store, retail store that was willing to take me on and help me build, um, and believe in the brand enough to be able to support that. And so that's the goal at the moment. But for right now, strictly 2 major channels, which is burkeavenue.com and Amazon.
What is your advice for anybody that's looking to get into direct to consumer sales online? Do you think it's better to do both Amazon and have your own platform, or do you do all? I just saw another entrepreneur that had Dude Wipes. They were on Shark Tank, and I'm following that guy on LinkedIn, and he says that they are getting rid of all of their e-com stuff on their website, which is interesting. And so I didn't know if you have a preference over Amazon or your site. Like, which one do you think is better?
I feel like when it came to selling my products, there was never a doubt that there was enough support and platforms out there to sell it. You have the Shopify, you have the what's the WordPress one, WooCommerce, and you have the Etsy's, and I've just seen so much success in that space. Just personal friends of mine that have had their own little side businesses and things of that nature, and making decent amount of money. And I feel like there's just so many opportunities right now that are so robust that you can have a full-on business model digitally, especially with, say Shopify. My brand is on Shopify right now, and it's just such a plug and play system. I can say that there is a challenge with the cost of shipping that has increased, especially since COVID. That in a lot of ways, it's more financially advantageous for me to then have a distribution channel with Amazon, because they're a very, very big company, and they can negotiate and manage their shipping costs a lot better than a small company like me. And so I have seen a lot of success and a lot of growth in that space on using Amazon. And I have a good friend of mine that has a beach bikes company that has had major success and continues to with his distribution channel in Amazon. And so when it comes to giving advice, I feel like the e-commerce space is it's so much opportunity for there. I think you just really need to know who your consumer is and how you're really wanting to reach that consumer, because the more you can customize and package your products and ship them out yourself is the more love you can put to the unboxing experience that a consumer might have if you're trying to win them on not only the great performance of your product, but also how it looks when you open it up. A lot of times you really can't accomplish that with Amazon, because Amazon is just throwing it in a brown box and shipping it out to you, or soon to drop it off in a drone. So I feel like if you're looking for that really good personal touch in the beginning, I feel like it's great. Like I did, I packaged all my products for years on my own. I would come home after cutting hair, and I say, all right, well, let's box up these products, and I'll ship them out, put my labels on them, and send them out, And I feel like that is a great way to really grab hold of the consumer in the beginning. And if you can maintain that throughout your entire career of running that business, I feel like that personal touch really goes a little further.
Do you guys do anything now with the boxes you sell from your website that you do uniquely touch people when they open the boxes?
Good question. So I do very little. I initially wanted to have like this really beautiful box, and kind of like how Art of Shaving has. Oh no, they no longer have that, but they used to have it. Their shaving cream comes in a box, and their products come in a box. And come starting off, I researched that, and I just couldn't. I couldn't convince myself to spend that extra money on the packaging. And so what I did is I said, well, let me just invest in how beautiful the bottle and the jars look. And so now with the fulfillment house, they wrap them up real nice and they package them really nice. And I have an insert and I have samples that come into the product. But that is my next goal. Once I complete my third product, I would like to then look into how I can get a nice package put together with 3 products if you're like buying a kit or something of that nature. And so eventually that'll be the case. But I feel like I've won in a way because I spent time with the logo and making sure it looks nice, and the design of the bottles and stuff like that. It looks nice on the counter. And so I feel like so far I don't think I've lost anything in that space yet. So
yeah. No, it's interesting to think about the aesthetic of something being on somebody's counter. It's what's interesting to that from a marketer's perspective, at least, is that every time they go into their bathroom and it's sitting on their counter versus being in their drawer, it's another impression where it's a positive impression too, because they're like, oh, this looks nice on my counter. It makes my bathroom look better. It doesn't make my wife angry sometimes if she's looking, it's like, why is all your junk out? You've at least, Craig's hooked you up to where you've got a nice aesthetic shaving cream container on the counter versus like an old school Barbasol red and white looking nonsense thing. So, yeah. So I totally get it. I think that's really smart. I mean, I think a lot of new e-commerce entrepreneurs, at least in my experience, they, cash is tight, especially if you're bootstrapping early on. You've got to be very cognizant of every dollar you spend. And, unfortunately, we waste a bunch of dollars because we don't know what we don't know yet. And part of that education process is spending money, learning. Well, that looks like it resonated. So maybe we should pause here for a second. What is some dollars you've wasted that you've learned the hard way you shouldn't have? I'd love to hear that story.
oh man, dude, if I could take back the amount of money I spent initially, getting a fulfillment partner to ship my products and take all that money back, I would have done that in a heartbeat, man. I thought I understood the concept of how much you pay, and then they add the handling costs and all this kind of stuff. I said, okay, I wrapped it into my budget, and I was just like, dude, where's my profits on this? And I did that for 6 months, and I was like, it's definitely going to get better. It's going to get better. And the reason I did that initially is because I was cutting hair. There's no way I could see myself spending all day coming home and then packaging all the stuff. I didn't even think about what that looked like on my end. I just thought, no, I'll just make these products and I'll have someone else do it for me. And man, and it was a very big brand, big company, So I would look for the best. I wasn't looking for, a mom and pop. I didn't know if I could trust a mom and pop, and so I went with a brand that wasn't super super high, but managed small companies. But man, it was a lesson in how much it cost me to how much it cut into my profits, and I wish I didn't do that. I could have just done it, gone home like I did eventually, and bought some boxes and just packed it to myself. You know, and that's how you should be. I feel like as an entrepreneur, I read a book. I cannot remember the name of it. I want to say it was the Startup J Curve, but I don't believe that's the book. But that's another good book. But I read a story about being an entrepreneur, that when you are looking to eventually hire people, you should spend time as an entrepreneur writing down all the different things that you do. And you should do them. You should not outsource them in the beginning, because if you outsource them in the beginning, you'll never know how much it takes to do it. And so had I packaged it myself and then I called the customer hotline to get a fulfillment manager on my account, and he's telling me all this stuff, and I was saying, wait a minute, how much? Oh, I could do that for a fraction of that cost. And then I would know I'm going to do that on my own, and I can afford it, or I have to afford it until I can't. And I think in all these roles that we do as entrepreneurs, because we have 45 different roles, it's important to do them first. So then when you bring someone on, you know how to direct them, and also so they don't waste your money, as well as, you can manage and say, no, I don't need that type of service. I just need this. And I feel like that was an important lesson for me.
Yeah.
Just start off, do it yourself first, at least get an idea of what you need before you go out and try to outsource it. So
how do you determine when it's time to outsource some of the work you've done?
That's a good question. This is my litmus test barometer. When it begins to overwhelm my personal life and relationship with my family, I'm outsourcing it. I refuse to compromise the little time that we have on this earth with our loved ones, to the point where if I ask my son, what are the top 3 things that you love? And the first one is my company, that's a problem. And so I've learned that very early, that you got to find that balance. And when it starts cutting into my personal life, we either cutting it or we're outsourcing it, period. It's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. I don't care if whatever that decision makes me into a and this is silly to say, but I honestly, maybe I'll regret it one day to say this, but if that decision that compromised the time with my family turns me into a multimillionaire, then what do I gain when my kid is just like, I don't know my dad, I'm a millionaire. Yeah, he buys me everything, and I've experienced that. And that's why I hold it so close to my chest. A lot of my customers and clients, I saw that sitting in the chair. I saw those relationships that they had with their wives and kids just be non-existent because of their drive to, be famous and successful. So that's one thing I'm not willing to compromise.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my next question. I was going to ask about, how do you walk the line of, like, I often equate having a business to having another family, because it can be a very time consuming thing almost 24/7, 365 if you're not careful. And so how do you and
Yep,
your spouse handle that? And is it communication? Is it weekly meetings? Like, do you guys, like, how do you handle running a business and having a
that's a
successful
good question.
family?
Yeah, well, I can't say I've perfected it, but what I can say is I try my best to just be done at a certain time of the day. Um, if I can execute all my key things successfully before 2 p.m. is kind of how I like to set it up. I feel like I could then transition out. It took me some time to realize where that cutoff point is, but I realized that my bandwidth just in general kind of tapers off after 2. I get up at 5 in the morning. So at 2, I'm forcing whatever I'm working on, I'm forcing it. And that just makes it worse when I'm communicating with my son because he has a million and one things he always wants to share. And so if I'm already frustrated past 2, then whatever he's sharing is just going to become this conflict and this frustration. And so that is kind of where my little balance is there. There are times where I'll say, "Hey, listen, sorry, I'm going to have to jump in on this, or I have to do this, but I'll be back." So it's not a perfect formula, but I know that now he's 12, and I've seen the progress and how important it is to just have that hard stop. And that I read a really cool book, The One Thing. I don't know if you've ever read that book. That's a really good book. And it basically says, what are you going to do today to basically put you in a position to accomplish the next 2, 3, 4 things tomorrow or even later that day. And so that's what I try to focus on. What is the one thing I need to do today that when I'm done at 2, I'm like, you know what, it's a good day today, and so I could then transition that out.
I got to know though, like you are at the corporate level, at least you and I were talking before, like you are a solo entrepreneur still. I mean, it is incredible what you've done with outsourcing things and bringing on contractors and, third party logistics and other vendors to handle things. Like, what was your thought process behind sort of keeping a lean corporate model versus, you're 7 years in, I'm sure you could have been hiring people the whole time to be in-house. I've seen entrepreneurs do it both ways. I've seen it go well both ways. I've seen it gone poorly. And so I don't know if there's a right or a wrong, but I'd love to know why you specifically chose the model you did.
The number one reason is I didn't choose to go into my skincare line with pitching to a bunch of investors and saying, "Hey, this is what I'm going to do." I looked at myself and said, I'm going to believe in this for myself first before I bring in anybody and borrow their money. I hate that. That's probably one of the biggest struggles I have just as a small business owner is taking on debt and borrowing money. The whole adage of using other people's money to really build a business is I struggle with that, and I definitely didn't want to do that from the onset. And so what really helped me be lean is like I'm reinvesting every single dollar that comes into Burke Avenue. I'm reinvesting it back into Burke Avenue. I'm just gonna keep doing that for as long as I can, and as long as it's feeding itself, then I can make sure that whatever I'm doing, which was at the time cutting hair, I will use that for my income for the family. And Burke Avenue just got to feed itself. If it doesn't feed itself, then it's just going to be a failed venture. And so that was the mentality I created then, and it's still the mentality I keep today. I said, if it's not feeding itself, it's losing. It has to continue to feed itself. And yeah, I pull a little bit. I pull some from it, but at the end of the day, I'm not at a point where it is this multi-billion-dollar company that's going to be really crushing it and stuff like that. And so I pick my investments when it comes to the brand on what I can do, what is not worth it for me to do, and then I outsource it. And because I know that the brand is very nimble, it's 2 products, right? I do a lot of the marketing on my own. And, I did invest, as I shared with you before we got on this call. I invested in a mic just like you. And I got a backdrop that I'm going to start giving some long form stories and things of that nature on YouTube that's going to help continue to bolster the brand and build that relatability. And I feel like the efforts of keeping it lean is what's going to give me the rooted foundation to make this a lasting brand. I don't want a flash in the pan brand. The goal is to make this brand the blueprint for future men's skincare brands. And so with that, I have to go through the struggles that I go through and the challenges I go through to get the rooted foundation. So when it hits the way it's supposed to, the barrier of entry is a little bit more challenging. And so that's the goal. That's the goal.
You've been doing this for 7 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Two-sided coin question here. What is your favorite thing about being an entrepreneur? And then what has been way harder than you thought it would be day one?
It's almost like when a person used to come and get a haircut with me. I got excited for them because they had no clue how great their service was going to be. Right? To me, I was like, ooh, you're in for a treat. I said, I'm fixing that haircut. I don't know who you went to before. I'm going to show you how to really shape this haircut. I'm going to show you why you're getting those ingrown hairs or why you're getting that shaving irritation. I'm going to show you everything. And when you leave, you're leaving better than you came. And I felt like I translated that into my skincare brand because when someone buys that product, I know that they're going to love it. So I get excited about them buying it because I'm like, ooh, man, that's a new customer. I can't wait to hear their response. I can't wait to see their review. I used to give samples. I used to sell samples on my e-commerce site just for people to try it out. And I was basically paying for the shipping costs. It was because it's these tiny samples. 96% conversion rate. Anybody that bought a sample, 96% of them immediately bought the products. And so that's the best part of my brand is that I get excited about someone buying it because I'm like, man, they're going to love it, you know? And the second one would be the repeat customer, you know? They love it so much they buy it again, you know? Um, the challenging part and the most difficult part of this journey is constantly fine tuning the message to get it to where the consumer understands the difference and then finding angles to get the reach, the brand awareness that is required to get it to those consumers. So for me, I never thought it was going to be that difficult to reach my target audience. And so that has been, I think, the biggest challenge for me. And I think I've seen that initially in the beginning. I didn't recognize it that much because I had a very, very, very high presence, and I was still cutting hair. I had a very high presence. I was still doing writing in my blog. I was just doing too much, essentially. But the traction and the reach was there. And as I started tapering it off, and my son was born, and spending more time with him and my wife and things of that nature, I saw it kind of taper in a sense because the visibility wasn't there. But at the end of the day, I understand the message, but I have the biggest challenge in the reach. And how do I get people to grasp it and understand it? That is not so complex because I am an expert, and sometimes you have to water it down so people just get like, what makes this so special? Boom, boom, boom. You know, for me, I'm like, oh, it does this, it does that, it has this, and you're just like, whoa, I didn't even know what an essential oil is, right? And so that's what people are like, what's an essential oil? I'm like, oh, yeah, those are
Let me
like
walk this
very
back.
nuanced things, right? Walk it back a little bit. Give it a dummy version, Craig. And so that's been the most difficult is realizing how hard it is to really get that message out there and getting the return for those efforts.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. We have a lot of clients, and this is not a sales pitch for High Beam, but it is you're not alone, I guess is what I would say to that, because my favorite story I tell people is my first business was a barbecue restaurant that I did with my parents. And so me and my mom worked in the business every single day together side by side. And I was the business side of things. She was the artist. You know, she was cooking food farm to table before it was a cool buzzword on the internet, right? And so she was very talented as a home cook, and we made backyard barbecue, which, you know, it's great. Everybody loves it. And I was trying to, in the early days, explain to her, because my art is building businesses. Like I love this and conversations and like investing, all the things. What her art was the food. And so I did a really bad job originally trying to explain to her, hey, look, you know your thing at a 10, at a high level that nobody else could probably know it at. Like, you are a expert in the field. And you think about it probably 100,000 times more than everybody else that pays you for your thing thinks about it. Like, that the only time they think about it is maybe half an hour before lunch and they go, I'm hungry, where are we going today? And then they list out their top 5, right? That's when they think about it. And she would get frustrated because she'd be like, why don't we have more customers? And I would have to explain to her, I'm like, look, people are busy. We get early entrepreneurs, especially especially when it comes to like, how do you market your business, at scale for the first time beyond word of mouth and referrals? We get so in the weeds with what we know about the product, and honestly, it comes from a good place. It's the love we have for the product gets in the way of our ability to like market the thing effectively, which is so stupid if you think about it. You're like, wait a second, so you're telling me I love the product too much, and then that gets in the way of me being able. And the reason is because if I asked you about your son, you'd give me a billion things you love about him, right? And nobody would bat an eye. But if you started telling me all the billion things you love about your product in one setting, or in one ad, or in one YouTube video, or one Facebook post, or whatever it is, you're never like people are going to be so quickly turned off by it because it's too about you. It's not about them. And ultimately you want it to be about them, but your way of conveying that is like, hey, I've gone to the well, created this amazing thing, and now I'm going to sell it to you for this very reasonable price because what I know about it, it should be 10 times more expensive, but I'm a good guy and I'm not trying to price gouge you. And like, but it's so long-winded way of saying you just love your product too much. And like, that's probably what's the hang up, is that you're not able to go, okay, if I had to boil it all down to the core benefit here, and just put that in an ad, that would convert, and it's not a unique problem to you, man. I'll say that. So you're definitely not alone.
I love that. Dude, you hit the nail on the head. You are not the first. You have given enough backstory to then say that statement to help me to understand it way better than my buddies that have told me that in a different way. They're just like, no, just say this, and I'm looking at it like, dude, that's like rude. Like, why would I disrespect my product like that? And they sometimes will like give advice, and to the point where the dumbing down just sounds disrespectful. But you coming from how you just shared it, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we get in our way of sometimes of our emotional connection to our product because we love it. It's our baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't disrespect my baby. I love my son, and this is why. This is why. No, not don't reduce him to this one thing or these two
Mm-hmm.
things. This is all
Yep.
of it. So yeah, I totally get it. I totally get it. Interesting.
I call it the artist entrepreneur dilemma, because your company is your art, and like a lot of us that are building the thing, it's like you've already talked about it in this show, like the communication one-on-one with people, the designing of the packages, what goes into the actual bottles themselves, how do we actually solve the problems of ingrown hair, all that stuff is correct. It's too much on one date on Facebook in an ad, and that's where people's messages end up getting watered down. Um, but it's definitely not a unique thing. It's definitely not. And the reason why, I like that you enjoyed the way I said it, because it can be hard to tell people, hey man, you're not alone, but you're doing this wrong. But the reason I understand it is because I've lived it. And what what I heard, at least resonating for you, was the story element. So I led that with a story and then gave you the tactic. And so for you, for anybody out there listening, this is me getting on my marketing soapbox. Lead with the story, lead with the emotion, and then that emotion drives people to justify logically why they're going to buy your thing, instead of just go down to the Kroger here in the States and buy Barbasol, right? All right, so this is a little bit of a unique question here, so feel free to take some time to think this one through. So
Sure.
there's a bunch of rules in entrepreneurship. If we read through any of these books back here, a lot of them would probably repeat the same advice over and over and over again. Is there something that you hear people be told to do in the entrepreneurship space, or leadership space, or business owner space, that everybody else, it's sort of like a rule, and you think it's not a rule? Like, that's not actually something that you think is true. So I can give you a example here. Everybody tells small business owners to do organic social media, like to make content for Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, right? I think that's a terrible idea. I think that these social media platforms are so sophisticated now that if you want to actually make money on any of these platforms, you've got to learn how to run paid ads on their platforms. Everything else is just sort of a nice to have down the road. But everybody's advice is like, hey, you got unlimited time, so just learn how to make content. And it's like all of them are frustrated because they're 2 years later, they're not sold one extra thing and they've made 100 TikTok videos. And I think that is the worst advice that's been going around the internet right now.
That one drives me bananas. The one you just shared, because it's on every feed. You pull open your social media platform, and everyone's saying, "Hey, buy my thing, and I'll show you how to do this." Or I get constant DMs. Oh, I'm a UGC, and blah 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 blah, and so I have helped this company increase 300 something percent, and I'm like, how are so many of these people doing this, and why is it that I don't see these? Where are these companies at? What am I missing? I feel like there is, with that, I'll lead with that particular scenario. I feel like there's this sentiment about entrepreneurship with that statement that makes people feel that entrepreneurship is easy. That it's like, oh yeah, just start a business. Just target your ads, target your consumers. Yeah, you just do this. Just share this, and you're like, I feel like it's a lie to the person that is looking to become an entrepreneur, because it's not that easy. If it was that easy, everyone would do it. If that's easy, every single entrepreneur would be wealthy beyond their means, and it's just not the case. And I feel like those people that are selling that are selling it because they are selling it to then for you to buy it from them. They themselves are the entrepreneurs selling that product to convince you to use them to then have them make money. And so I feel like it's so much of that, and I feel like it's a lie. And so that is one thing I would have to, you hit the nail on the head. I would say that's one of the biggest things that I struggle with wanting to believe, but I just know isn't true. I know that paid ads, I've done it myself. Making specific content for paid ads literally give me far more reach than if I'm just sitting out some just spending time editing something and I get a few likes. It's just like, what am I doing here? And so
what's the old adage? You can't buy groceries with likes or views.
Right. You cannot do it. And it's, for so many years, people were selling likes, right? There's probably still companies out there like, hey, you pay me X amount of dollars. Now you get these likes, but what do they translate to if you're spending more money than you're making, getting likes? So that's a lie to me. I think that the fact that there's so many platforms out here on the market, it's so easy to convince someone that, oh, I'll just do this. I'll just do a bunch of content, and of course I'm going to sell. No, I think that's a small percentage of people.
Well, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, you're just making that social network more popular because you're just filling their feed with content, and it's not necessarily growing your business. But I do want to go back. So the thought that everything is easy in entrepreneurship because it gets glorified on, again, social media, people can put their highlight reel up and it looks a certain way, is very true. And there's something about these algorithms. They like to promote people that promote their services. And so what I mean by that is, like, if you go on Instagram, you'll see a lot of content about how to blow up on Instagram. And it's like, of course, that's going to get promoted. And what I equate those people to is, if you think about the gold rush here in the States back in the day, who got rich? There's a few miners that figured it out, got lucky, got the right claim, and they hit the gold mine. Literally where the saying comes from. They hit it. Who actually got rich consistently was the suppliers of the miners. And that is what I put the majority of, like, internet gurus in that bucket. It's like, you're selling most people with a dream and axe, and they don't even know how to dig the damn hole, where to dig the hole. And that's ultimately why I'm trying to get more people like you on podcasts like this, because I think there's so much misinformation out there that, people need to hear real stories from people in the trenches. So I appreciate you coming on and spending the last hour, man. This has been great. It's a lot of gold here. So I got last question here, man. I want to give you a second. I know you're a big thinker. You're thinking long term. Tell me, what is the big, almost just out of reach, like big vision for Burke Avenue?
I have this vision that there is, and call it a fantasy. I almost want to put myself in the Cinderella category of the prince finding me or something. But I have this big vision and belief that there is a brand or a company out there that will eventually, this might be silly, but let's just call it this silly, that definitely will see an opportunity for a budding brand that is really making a major impact on its consumers consistently. Um, that would then say, you know what? It's a small brand. It's an opportunity there. I see no major challenge for me to take them on as a retailer, and help me build a brand, help me really make a major impact in the space of men's grooming. And I don't know if I answered your question, but I kind of feel that's that carrot. That's what kind of I believe exists out there. I've seen it personally. I have personally seen this happen with companies, and it's just a matter of just the networking and the people that you reach. The one thing I do know about my product line is that it's not garbage. It's absolutely amazing products, and I am biased, but I'm telling the truth. It took a total of 6 years to make both products, and they're quality, and so I believe that there's an opportunity there for a retailer to take the pitch that I pitched to them and say, you know what, let's give this guy a shot. Let's give this company a shot and support me in really doing that reach necessarily. I don't think I'm that far off.
No.
And I hope I'm not. I hope I'm not.
No.
I feel like
I think that's one conversation. I mean, that's like literally, you're one conversation away from that happening. So maybe I would
I think
love
so.
for that to come out of this show. That would be amazing for both of us.
Oh,
So
that would be amazing. Could you imagine?
let's just
That would
speak
be
it into
really cool, man.
existence. We're gonna put it out
Exactly.
there.
Hey,
We're gonna manifest it, make it happen. That's great.
and
Well,
indeed.
Craig the Barber, Craig, my new friend and a
Absolutely.
secret travel vacation destination that I'm not going to
Yes.
tell anybody about, and that's a secret between you and I. Deep cut
There
here
we
at the end of
go.
the episode for everybody that's still around. We appreciate you joining
There
us
we
today,
go.
man. We're going to make sure to link up Burke Avenue, your website, your LinkedIn, where everybody can connect with you, and then
Please
you're
do.
going to be launching your own show very soon, which I'm really excited about. I can't wait to be one of the first 5 viewers on that. And
Oh man,
man,
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much for being so generous with your stories, your time, your information. This was great. I know there's going to be some other budding entrepreneurs that want to sell stuff online. They're going to get value out of this. So I appreciate you, man. I appreciate everybody that's tuned in listening. We will see you next week.